Hi, seventh graders. We're going to talk about music history today. You may remember that last year we talked about the Baroque period, or I called it the Barack Obama period of music history. This year we're talking in seventh grade about the classical period in music history. So this comes directly after the Baroque period. Baroque period ended in 1750 when Bach died. So this one starts in 1750 and it goes till 1820. Though I sometimes say if you wanted to say until 1827, because that's when Beethoven died. So Beethoven's one of the guys who we're going to be talking about today. All right. So this year in orchestra, I'm sorry, I'm going to pause. If you haven't either brought up as a document or printed out the music history notes for seventh grade, go ahead and do that right now. If you bring it up as a document, you can listen to me talk and you can fill in the notes. Those need to be submitted, and that's what you're going to study from to take the quiz. Okay, the quiz needs to be taken by Friday. All right, so here we go. This year in orchestra, we discussed the classical period of music history. The classical period lasted from the year 1750, which I just said, which was when Bach died, until the year 1820 or 1827. I would take either. Okay. Music of the classical period is very simple and structured. So if you remember anything about the Baroque period, we talked about the fact that they liked fancy. They liked bling. They liked it in their art. They liked it in their architecture. They liked it in their music. So they added lots and lots of ornaments or decorations, trills and grace notes and things like that. This is completely different. So there was an increased interest in classical Greece and classical Rome, and people were starting to travel a little bit more, and they liked things simple and structured. Okay, that's important. When you think about some of the buildings in classical Greece and classical Rome, and I know that you studied those last year in social studies, you remember that you have this triangle at the top and you have the pillars and they're symmetrical. That's what people were looking for. They were looking for a little more simplified. Okay, it says people in the classical period wanted balance and contrast without extremes. The name classical is applied to the period because in art and literature there was interest in the history of Greece and Rome. All right, two new musical forms. That means the way the music is put together. And this one should actually ring a bell for you. During this classical period, we started with a musical form called the sonata form. Now, that may not sound familiar to you at all, but if I said A form, that might be a little more familiar to you. It means the beginning is an A, the middle is a B, and the end is the same as what we had at the beginning, so we'll call it an A again. Okay, and sometimes, like in Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, we'll call it sandwich. Okay, so it's not officially called sandwich, but we remember that the beginning and the end are the same. All right. The second big form that was becoming popular, because up until through the Baroque period, we were doing series of dances, so all those minuets or all those bourrées or things like that. So now we have the symphony, and a symphony is a large work. So it's larger, probably. The organization that'll be playing it is probably larger than a chamber ensemble, which is what we had before. So we're going to have a full symphony orchestra. You may have heard that term. And we're going to play a symphony. So a symphony is a larger work. It's made up of 4 contrasting movements. So it's like 4 smaller songs within a large song context. Okay, all of those movements are somehow related, either by key or theme, which means you're going to be hearing the melody or something that is going to continue through all of those different movements. But they all come together. That's when people clap in the middle of orchestra and you know that they're not supposed to clap because there's something and it's moving on to another movement. So there are 4 movements and it's called the symphony. Those are our 2 different forms of music that we have, the sonata form and the symphony. All right, who was writing music during the classical period? Now, there were a lot of people writing music, but we're going to concentrate on 2 of them who you probably already know. Mozart. Mozart was kind of a party guy. He was a prodigy, which means that he was a prodigy, which means that it seemed like everything came to him very easily. So he started touring and playing for royalty just when he was little. He started composing when he was 5. And when I say he was a party guy, he really was a party guy. He liked parties, he liked dancing, he liked music. Um, he burned out relatively early, and he died at 35. um, Beethoven is almost his polar opposite. Beethoven was very serious. They said he was kind of cranky. And he was also a piano player. Mozart played the piano. And he was a composer. His father was his teacher, and he was also very gifted, and he was very famous and popular at the time. He eventually went deaf he had a disease. So later in life, he went deaf, and he lost his hearing completely, but he continued to compose right up through the end. There are two movies, if anybody's interested. Amadeus is about Mozart, if you want to watch with your parents. And Beethoven, oh my gosh, I've lost my mind. I'm sorry, it's called Copying Beethoven. Is a kind of a neat, it's about the Ode to Joy performance, and it's about someone who comes into Beethoven's life and copies down his music because we don't have computers and typewriters and things like that. So Copying Beethoven is another fun piece. Okay? Two different things that you're going to hear when you listen to classical music, besides that structure, simple and structured. And I kind of say this in jest, but I think cellists and violists might appreciate Baroque music a little more because they liked to use counterpoint, or they liked to use multiple melodies. And it seemed as though they shared the melody a little bit more. In this case, when you listen to classical music, you may be able to identify one main melody, and that is generally in the highest voice, which is going to be the violins, of course, right? And so we call it homophony. So we have one melody up here, and then cellos and basses and violas, boom, 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 boom. We're just going to hold down the fort, and we're going to set up our chords, and we're going to keep it steady. And that's what they were looking for. They liked that one main melody. So it's homophony. Okay? Now, the last thing that I was going to say is this keyboard instrument was becoming much more popular. Piano actually really means pianoforte. We have the ability now to play on a keyboard instrument that can make loud noises and soft noises. So we have dynamic contrast in there. Before, we had harpsichords, we had clavichords, we had organs, and we didn't have the ability to change the dynamic contrast on that. Just by hitting the hammer, it didn't make a difference if they were plucking the strings. They could just pluck them just so hard. So that became much more popular. So that would be the keyboard. Okay, so that's it. So hopefully you have gone through and filled out your notes after studying them. Go ahead and you can take the quiz on Schoology. Please do that without your notes, if you can do that. That would be great. And there is one other opportunity. I was going to require it, but if you have time in your week, there are 3 different sheets to read about 3 different composers. Okay, so there's Beethoven, there's Mozart, and there's one other one. Obviously, there were lots of other composers during that time. And there's like a fun activity sheet that goes along with that. If you want to hand that in for extra credit, that would be fantastic. If you don't get a chance to do that, definitely do these notes. Definitely do the test, and that's due by Monday. Also, look on the calendar to find out what you should be practicing for next week. Okay, because next week is going to be another playing quiz, and it's going to be in your Suzuki book, or bases, it'll be in your the Rags, Boogies, and Blues. Okay, I think that's it. So hopefully you guys have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye.